Good morning, Alan. How are you?
Hey, good morning. How are you? We did this for Texas Flood. I remember you, and I remember doing it. So thank you for having me twice.
Oh, absolutely, dude. You're on here. I think at the end of every conversation, I always said the door is always open, and here we are again.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
I wish I had this when I was just starting out in radio. This is the kind of stuff that as an on-air talent, we wanted to bring the story to listeners. But the only thing we got was Joel Whitburn. I love Joel, but it wasn't this book.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, I appreciate it. I'm totally honored to be able to tell these stories and to have them, received by people, and people are enjoying them. And I'm getting great feedback. The book's only been out for a day as we speak, and it's so gratifying. I mean, I felt great about this book, but it's a thing sitting on your computer and working for years, and then the progression is amazing, and then finally you get a copy in your hand. It's an amazing feeling, but the real birth of it isn't when you get that copy. It's when other people get the copy. So it's really, really gratifying. So and I'm thrilled that now I can talk about it with great people like you instead of it all being theoretical.
Oh my God, Alan. I mean, to relinquish it though, I mean, we all go through a painful moment where it's like, okay, this is no longer my child. I have to give it away. How did you deal with that?
I certainly know exactly what you're talking about, but it's ultimately not that hard for me. It doesn't mean there's not regrets. I mean, I've already found a couple of mistakes in the book, and I read the audiobook, which was a great experience. And the audiobook, by the way, is really cool. It has about 40 clips, well, exactly 40 clips of guys in the band talking. Oh. From my interviews and from Kirk West, which is an incredible stash of interviews that we can talk about that I was able to use. So that's really cool. But and I was thrilled to be able to read it. I wanted to do it. I pushed to do it, and I'm glad I did it. But I did find some mistakes while I was doing it. I found sentences that I thought, oh my goodness, that should have been 3 sentences, and that should be a different paragraph. I mean, It's impossible not to do that. So. But the reality is, if I had kept it for another month or 6 months, there still would be things. They might be different things. So it's just part of the process. And I'm sure you know this from interviewing musicians. I mean, of course, before I ever wrote a book or became a recording musician myself, I interviewed so many musicians. And so many times you say to someone, oh, I love such and such song. They say, oh my God, really? I can't stand my guitar tone on that. Because it's 6 months after they recorded it. And I always intellectually understood that, but I never emotionally understood that until I started writing books, because it's the same thing. You eventually have to sign off, and it's okay. That's part of the life of being a creative person in whatever form you're creating. You have to ultimately accept it. And there's going to be things you want to change, and it's okay. Because some people never can get over that. And they write great songs or great stories or great books. And because of that fear, they don't put them out. And I think that's a lot sadder. I'm glad that that's not a problem I suffer. I can accept that I'm a flawed being, and everything I create will have some flaws, but it's all about the big picture. And in the big picture, I feel great about this book. So,
but Alan, they didn't have smartphones where a lot of these musicians today are dropping their tracks and their riffs right on the spot. I mean, when Brothers and Sisters came out, I mean, they had to either record it on a tape recorder, a cassette recorder, or someplace. Otherwise, it would have been lost forever.
Yes, that is true. There's a great story I have in this book, which I was thrilled to find. I hadn't heard this. I talked to Buddy Thornton. Okay, he's the engineer at Capricorn Studio. So generally, who cares about the engineer? Well, you never know. I talked to everyone. I mean, first of all, they're interesting guys, but he had a great story that he was in the studio one day alone, and the band wasn't recording, and Dickey came running in with his dobro, and he said, Set up a mic. I need a vocal mic and a guitar mic. I got something. I got to record it. He had just written Pony Boy, and he didn't have any means of demoing it. And so he grabbed his dobro and he ran to the studio. Buddy was the guy there. He quickly set up a stool and 2 mics, a vocal mic and a guitar mic, and he recorded it really, literally, so he remembered it that ends up being the version on the album.
Wow.
I mean, what you hear on the album is the first time Dickey Betts played that song. And of course, they added an acoustic guitar and drums, but it wasn't really drums. It was Butch Trucks stomping his feet on piece of plywood. So they layered onto it a little bit, but that's it. And so that I loved that story. It was one I had never heard, and it turns out that most people in the Allman Brothers orbit hadn't heard it. So there were tons of little tidbits like that. I mean, that's a fun but relatively insignificant one. There's a lot of bigger ones in here as well, and it's just fun. I mean, it's really exciting that I could be writing about the Allman Brothers for 30 years and keep finding new stuff. And there's a lot of it in this book, which I'm really happy about and proud of.
Do you think that's the reason why when you turn on the music, it sounds brand new? Because, with Dickey Betts doing that, I mean, my God, it's in the moment of now.
Yeah. Boy, that's a good question. I have wrestled with that a little bit myself, and I keep in interviews in various ways that concept keeps coming up.
Yep.
Not what you suggested about why, but the question of why. Why does this music still sound so fresh? And on the first hand, I think that's a good theory. That is part of it. And I think not just that song specifically, or not just an example where they literally recorded a demo and that became the final version, but I think more broadly, there was a lot of spontaneity happening. And what you hear on this album is the sound of a band going through the grieving process of losing a member, losing another member, integrating two new members. And obviously that created a lot of problems and tensions and sadness, but it also created incredible focus. I mean, Lamar Williams plays the bass on all but the first two songs on the album, Wasted Words and Ramblin' Man with Barry Oakley. I mean, these are the first weeks he's playing with the band. And he did a remarkable job. I mean, you listen to it, it doesn't sound like a band working in a new member. It sounds like an incredibly cohesive band. Chuck Leavell had just joined the band at the very start of the recording, and his piano is all over it. I mean, the very first songs he recorded were Wasted Words and Ramblin' Man, and listen to the piano. Yeah, it's incredible. So I think it was just so much incredible focus going on, and it comes through. You can hear it.
You just shot me back to Billings, Montana as a kid when you talk about the piano, because I would sit there, I would hear that piano, and I would tell my mother, please teach me this piano. And my mother was very much against rock music, and she wouldn't do it. So I had to learn it, how to play those parts in an Allman Brothers song on my own piano, because my mother wouldn't teach me.
Well, she should have taught you.
I wish I could go back and do that.
But yeah, she should have taught you. But at the same time, her not teaching you forced you to learn yourself, and probably learn in a way, in a more profound way. And music played just a more central part in culture. Music played a more central part in everybody's lives. Dickey Betts literally dropped out of school at 16 and ran away to join the circus. Not the metaphorical circus, the actual circus. He played in like a, center, what did they call it? He played in a band at the circus. They were like the rock and roll kids, and this is in the early 60s and early Beatles happening and stuff. So, Duane Allman dropped out of school at 14 and was playing music full time. Barry Oakley, the bass player, dropped out of school to go on the road with Tommy Rowe and the Romans. So I'm not saying that I suggest anyone does that, but, Jimmy Vaughn, my last book was on Stevie Ray Vaughan, Texas Flood. Jimmy Vaughn dropped out of school at 14. Stevie Ray Vaughan never finished high school. Again, I'm not suggesting that this is a great path, certainly for my kids, but it was a different culture. And none of those guys were like, by any means, stupid people. I just want to make that clear. And they were not delinquents or whatever. They were just that dedicated to the music. And it played that central of a role in the culture that it didn't seem like an unreasonable thing to do. So I think all of that factors into why this music was so good and why it, resonates 50 years later.
Well, I've always called the Allman Brothers great head music in the way that I felt like the universe was moving through them and somehow it landed in my ears. And I just felt like that they were receiving and then giving away as fast as they could.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to look at it. And I think the Allman Brothers, one of the things that makes them unique is they are great head music, but they're also great body music
Oh,
and great soul music.
yep,
And
yep, yep.
a lot of bands are great at one of those things. And only a rare few can do all of them.
Yep.
And they always could do that. You know, they've got that blues swagger. I mean, One Way Out is not a head song. That's a gut punch song, and it's beautiful. Elizabeth Reed is a head song. You know, Melissa is a beautiful folk song. Blue Sky. I mean,
Yeah.
they operate on so many different levels, and that's to me why they have stood the test of time. And they wrote great songs. You know, people talk about the Allman Brothers and the Grateful Dead, and they think of the jamming and the instrumental majesty, and that, of course, is important and a big part of both of these bands. But the reason that their music has stood the test of time is all that stuff was built on the bones of really, really great songs. So, you know, I mean, the Grateful Dead weren't the Grateful Dead without Ripple and Friend of the Devil and China Cat Sunflower and Franklin's Tower. And the Allman Brothers aren't the Allman Brothers without all the songs we just mentioned,
Right.
Ramblin' Man and Jessica and Come and Go Blues, just on Brothers and Sisters, the album in question. So, it's just all of the above. There's bands that can do some of it, and then the handful that can do it all are the ones that stand the test of time and that we still love and listen to and write books about.
See, the thing that always gets me, Alan, is the fact that how did the Allman Brothers get to me in Montana? And the reason why I bring that up is because I'm from that age where FM radio was still a baby and Drake Chenault was controlling everything on the FM dial. I still don't understand how my heart found the Allman Brothers.
Because the heart will find what it needs.
Ah.
You know, I mean, I have a similar story. You know, I'm a little older than you, but still young enough that it wasn't, you know, I shouldn't have been so into this music when I was. And I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I just wrote an essay about that because people kept asking me, you know, how did a Jewish guy from Pittsburgh become the ultimate Allman Brothers
Right.
insider and biographer? And I mean, it happened because I loved the music, and I was fortunate enough to have a job at Guitar World magazine where I could keep getting access to the musicians, develop the relationships. But before all of that, it was just because I loved the music. It had this power on me. I love a lot of music, and I've always loved a lot of music, but something about the Allman Brothers resonated with me and resonated in my soul. From the very beginning. So I just wrote an essay about that in a publication called Pittsburgh Quarterly that just told my own story a little bit. And, you know, I'm glad that this book gave me the opportunity to do that because, you know, I hadn't really sat down and ironed it out. But ultimately, you know, you hear all different kinds of things, and what resonates. And it's hard to explain, except that when it does, it does.
Let me ask you a question. Now that you've written this book, does it clear the soul and the writing energy to be able to explore today's music? And the reason why I bring that up is because, I mean, the members of Tesla, every one of them are going out there to find new bands, but radio isn't playing the new bands. Do you have that energy in you that says, look, I need to go find these people?
Oh boy, sometimes yes and sometimes no would be my honest answer. So I love discovering new bands. So like when I go to a festival, I go to the Peach Festival every year. You know, I played at it this year, and I gave a book talk, and well, I usually do some kind of official thing, but I also spend some time just wandering around. And I do feel like if you go to a festival, it's on you to find one new band you really like.
Yep.
And, you know, somebody's already made some pre-selection. Somebody made the effort of sorting through these bands. So I walk around, you know, a few years ago, I discovered the band Fruition. I mean, they had been around for a long time, but I hadn't heard them.
Right.
When I get really busy, you know, like the last couple of years, I've been writing this book and I've been just slammed. And now I've been promoting the book. I mean, it becomes a full-time job. And at times like that, it's really hard for me to go out and see new music. I mean, because I tend to lean more and more on, you know, the things I love. Another great way to discover new music, by the way, is to go on Spotify or any of the music services, whatever you listen to, and just put on the radio for a song you love. I mean, go put on Blue Sky Radio, and it'll just start pulling through. A lot of it will be familiar stuff that you already know and love or don't love. But some of it will be new music. And I've discovered some great people that way. That I like the song, and then I double back, and you can go deeper and deeper, and that's what a lot of us did in the first place. I mean, how did so many people discover Muddy Waters? Because they heard that the Rolling Stones were named after a Muddy Waters song, or they heard the Allman Brothers do Trouble No More, and they thought, "Oh, Muddy Waters, who's that?" And they went and listened.
Yep.
And of course, not everyone does that, but a lot of people do, and you can still do that now.
The one thing that I've always talked about in my writing is the fact that I've always believed that the Allman Brothers were the social media. We talked about them without having to have an internet connected to it.
Yes, that is true. I mean, the other thing is that radio could be way more viral. And so when the song became a hit, it got played over and over and over.
Yeah.
So it was its own form of social media in a way. And, sometimes to the song's detriment. I mean, you can get sick of something really fast. But also it just exposed a lot of people to the music. I mean, if it was making it onto the radio, it was really making it. I mean, you would hear it, really hear it.
Do you still hear the concert commercials that were played on the radio? I mean, I can hear that voice on Cook Radio in Billings, Montana going, "The Allman Brothers are coming to the Metro." I can still hear it today.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and Caesar Engler was the promoter, and I can hear that voice perfectly.
Yes.
Exactly. The Caesar Engler production. And that meant something to me. And, I would hear those all the time, and I went to a lot of shows. Of course, I didn't go to a lot of shows, but I was fortunate to grow up in an era when, for some reason, my parents didn't quite know what I was up to and just let me go to these concerts, however the heck I was getting there to and from. So it was a great era. And yes, those radio ads had a huge influence on me. I mean, I still remember very much the Black and Blue tour, Black Sabbath and Blue Oyster Cult.
Yes. Oh my God.
Yeah.
See, I don't see people getting excited for something like that, except for a Taylor Swift concert. But I mean, but when we heard that 3 months from now that this band is coming to town, I mean, everybody in town got excited about it.
Yeah, that's right. And in a way, we have everything available to us now, but it can be hard to know even what's happening in your town. I mean, I used to go, on my way to work every day in New York City at Guitar World. I would pick up the Village Voice every Wednesday. Came out on Wednesday morning, pick it up. And yes, I would read the articles. But you know why I really made sure I got it every Wednesday? The ads for clubs and concerts. I mean, that's where they announced shows. So I'd go sit down at my desk with a cup of coffee and a pad and paper, and I'd flip through it, immediately go to the ads, not the editorial, and see what was happening and make a list. Okay, August 5th, Allman Brothers at Jones Beach, make a note to call someone to get tickets, etc. I mean, in that non-digital world where everything was put in one place, it was actually easier to find things. And it's a bit weird because everything is much more at our fingertips in ways that I personally really like and embrace. But I do miss more things. I do. Things that I'm not aware of that I used to be really on top of. So it's a struggle. and it's hard to get the word out on a book, for instance. I mean, I appreciate talking to people like you, and especially a lengthy conversation like this. But it is a challenge, like whatever you're doing. I mean, I have a band and we do great, Friends of the Brothers, but it's really hard to keep people's attention. So some people want to be alerted to things 6 months in advance, so they can put it on their calendar. And a lot of people these days, probably including me to a large extent, make their decisions like that day. That sounds good, but am I going to be free? And it's interesting. We're moving fast, and with social media, we all have access to so much information at once that any one piece of information can get lost. I mean, that is something that happens, and I think that's why an album like Brothers and Sisters also brings us back on some level to this era before all that, when things were a little simpler. And of course, it was, that's always an exaggeration because life was never simple for people. And, but the day-to-day life, because you weren't aware of all the other stuff happening in the world, it was easier to focus on what was going on in front of you. I think that's probably a better way to describe it.
God, I could talk to you all day, dude. I really could. Holy cow. Michael, tell those other people to get off the line. We don't need to talk to them because I'm going to talk with Alan for the rest of the day.
Unfortunately, rambling man, we got to wrap.
Look at you.
Hey, listen, Era, I'd be happy to talk more anytime you want. You can reach out directly to me or to my publicist either way. And I really enjoy talking to you as well. So would be my pleasure to do more if you ever want to.
Excellent. You be brilliant today, okay, Alan?
Thank you very much. You too. Appreciate that.